Welcome to the Hunt Backcountry Podcast. This is episode number 413. And today we're talking about some misconceptions on precision rifles and kind of custom rifles. The guys from AllTerra Arms join us today for this conversation. And we've connected. They're in Boise, where EXO is. Neither Steve nor I actually shoot an AllTerra rifle, but we've seen them, we've met them. We actually know some guys who shoot their stuff, and thought it would be fun just to connect with them and say, hey, what are some of the misconceptions that you guys see as a custom rifle builder about this whole world and about custom rifles or precision rifles for hunting in general? So we do get into a wide variety of topics all about rifles and bullets and reloading. Again, just to break down some misconceptions. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. It is our final episode of July of 2023, which means that our giveaway for this month is wrapping up. We do have a new one kicking off for August of 2023 as well. So whether you're hearing this in July or in August, go to exomountaingear.com/podcast. You can find the giveaway entry form there. If you happen to be hearing this after then, you can still check that out. We may not have a giveaway going on in the future, but at exomountaingear.com/podcast, you can find all of the podcast episodes going back many years at this point. You can browse by subject, you can search by keyword, and more. Go check that out if you are interested. Or right now, let's dive into this conversation with Drew and Todd from AllTerra Arms. Guys, welcome to the Hunt Backcountry Podcast. I'm really excited to chat with you. Drew, I'm going to kick this off with you, man. What's an introduction and background, both what you want to share about AllTerra, but also maybe just personally to the listeners, get to know you a little bit?
Yeah, so my name is Drew. We actually started Axial Precision, which is our parent company, in 2015. And the concept of the company, or what I wanted to originally do, was figure out why some rifles were more accurate than other rifles, especially like bench rest or competition rifles, and see if we could implement some of the technology that made those, or some of the characteristics that made those rifles super accurate, into hunting rifles that was, something that was more portable than, say, a bench rest gun that you have to carry around on a cart from match to match. And so literally started on napkin table drawing with a buddy and kind of analyzing different components of bench rest rifles, competition rifles, hunting rifles. And what I found was the tolerances and the machining of the different components kind of created a more accurate rifle. So what we ran into was, though, is a lot of the competition rifles or bench rest rifles, the tolerances were so tight that you get any dirt and grime in there that they'd actually seize up when you try and cycle them with dirt and grime or whatever. So they weren't very field reliable. And so we came up with this design, or I came up with this design that kind of gave us the best of both worlds, where when cycling the bolt and the receiver of these bolt action rifles, it would have very tight tolerances when the gun's in battery, and when you need those tight tolerances for accuracy when you're about to shoot it. And when you open up the bolt to cycle it, it went into a lot sloppier, a lot looser tolerance area, and therefore allowed to clear dirt and grime and ice. And now my original plan back then was to just modify existing receivers with some of this technology, but kind of deep diving into it, there's a lot of other improvements that could be made on existing receivers. So I decided, well, instead of just doing that, why don't I just make my own and fix the rest of these things? And then went further down that line and found out like, hey, we could have the best receiver on the planet, but you don't do the rest of the work, the chamber jobs, bedding, all this other stuff that really makes a rifle accurate, then it still won't be accurate. So we went down the line of making everything, making the entire rifle. My original plan was to just buy stocks and build rifles with our receivers and some of our, proprietary chamber job methodology, but it ended up being really hard to acquire stocks. So then we end up going down the whole line of designing our own stocks and figuring out how to lay up carbon fiber and here we are today, pretty much making almost everything kind of from scratch, or all the key components.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm sure we'll dive deeper into some of that for sure. Todd, how about for you? What is kind of some of your background, and when did you come on the team with AllTerra, and what role do you have now?
Yeah, so first of all, way to dominate the air, Drew. Yeah, Todd Harney here. I'm the general manager for Drew here at AllTerra. I've been in the hunting industry on the apparel and soft goods side since about 2013, and then moved over to Idaho and got connected through some other connections to AllTerra and jumped at the opportunity to switch gears and get into the rifle business, which was new for me. But of course, hunting my whole life and being familiar with rifles and enjoying long range shooting, it was a pretty easy transition and I think a good fit. And that was 2.5 years ago that I joined over here. And the team was much smaller than it is now. Kind of felt like my earlier days at a previous company that I worked at, and saw a ton of potential and kind of hit the ground running. And we're constantly working on everything from staffing to manufacturing quality to marketing and taking care of customers and just trying to grow this thing, which is really fun.
Sounds fun. Drew, I love that you did, like, it's almost like you can't keep from diving into your passion for what you're building, starting with that napkin and now to where you guys are at today.
Oh, and still, I mean, Drew is in the shop every day on a machine, diving into every little, I mean, I don't know how many times the word thou gets brought up. We need to, let's cut some thous, get things tighter, make things better, constantly improving. And it clearly drives him and drives us.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And what he's talking about is like thousandths of an inch. And in this world, thousandths of an inch are like a mile. We call them thous, just.
Yeah. One of the things when, we've crossed paths with you guys and it was like, yeah, it'd be fun to do a podcast. And I was like, we've done different podcasts over the years on rifles and different aspects of that, everything from, yes, the builds to cartridges and selection and all that. And I was thinking about, for you guys, like, what are some of the misconceptions that you guys run into that customers may have when they're calling you guys up, or that you see online or things like that? Because you do see kind of the full breadth of people in the industry with some knowledge and guys who I'm sure newer. And I was just wondering, like, what misconceptions are out there still that you see? And one of the topics that came out of that was that, you look at these rifle builders and their name may be on some things, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily making those products or those components of a build. And then, Drew, as you mentioned, you guys have brought more and more and more and more in-house over the years, starting with your receivers and now stocks and all that. So I guess let's just pull on that thread a little bit more of an assembler versus like a true rifle builder that's actually doing the work and building the things that have their name on them. Was that for you the very first component of that? You said was receivers. Is that the first kind of component that you brought in-house and truly wanted to manufacture?
Yeah, so at least originally I wanted to actually have we realized that the technology made a difference in accuracy. But it's kind of the sum of all the components, all have to be good, all have to be machined well, all have to, control harmonics properly in order for guns to shoot well. The part that I started off with was originally designing the receiver to have some of the technology that made it shoot better. But that actually wasn't the first part we brought in-house. We did some of the operations in-house, and then it was all my design. We had to get engineers and draw up everything and get, dimensional prints that could be machined to. And then we outsourced that for a couple of years. And then it got to the point where, we either had supply chain issues, timing issues, or quality issues. And so we end up rejecting a lot of the parts incoming from some suppliers. At that point, we're like, well, we got enough volume now that more out of necessity of just being able to get parts made to our exacting standards, that we brought in machinery to be able to do that in-house. So yeah, it did start with a receiver, and it's probably the most challenging part to make.
The whole action,
Yeah, the whole action, the bolt, the receiver, bolt stops, all that stuff, firing pin, shroud, and figuring out a manufacturing process for that. And most of the machine shops that when I originally started this really had a tough time making this. And that's why I think the majority of the people in this industry, the custom gun builders, they don't build that because of the amount of machinery and then the labor hours and kind of the know-how of being able to model something in CAD and then create prints that are actually machinable, and then, have the infrastructure, the machinery to be able to build these parts is incredibly capital intensive, and it takes a long time to do and a long time to figure out how to machine stuff, especially like hardened steel like these things are made of.
Yeah, that's one of the big differences with, it's probably worthwhile to note what the difference is in our action that makes it worthwhile for us to do all this work to manufacture in-house. For one, the steel is incredibly hard. So it's high quality steel. Everything is made pre-hardened, which is very tough on consumable tooling in the machines, slow to cut, requires specialized manufacturing knowledge on feeds and speeds of the tools, types of the tools. So that's kind of, we make our own bolts. We get them nickel boron coated. They kind of got to go across the country and back for this special coating we put on them. And then also the design, where the interaction between the bolt lugs and the inside of the receiver, and then also the barrel connection, which is Drew's kind of mastermind, if you will, concept, which is now patented. It's just, we feel like we're making something that is better than we could just go ahead and source.
This might be a rabbit hole to go down, but through this process, and you said that the accuracy is the sum of all the parts. What's the top, 2 or 3 things that you feel like are the most important to creating an accurate rifle? Like if you were to just, right off the top of your head, pick something.
So I would say 80% of the accuracy of guns, maybe more, comes from the machine work and the barrels. So if there's, you could have the greatest barrel and then have a gunsmith that accidentally messes up the rifling on the inside, while trying to do some machine work, and then that gun will probably never shoot very well. So there's a lot of single causes or potential causes of failure if something's not done right. If you don't have enough firing pin protrusion, you might get light primer strikes. That's on like the receiver side. So, there's a lot of single points of failure that, things have to be to spec or done properly. But if the receiver is like a great design and the barrel's machine work is, from the actual barrel manufacturer is done right, the lands and grooves, and then the machine work from the gunsmith's done right, those are probably the most important things.
Yeah, alignment and concentricity of everything from your bolt to the firing pin to the barrel connected onto the receiver to concentricity of the chamber, and then on down the barrel. It's really all about alignment and repeatability of that alignment from shot to shot.
Is there just a random thing that popped into my head? Have you noticed, is there certain cartridges are known to be more inherently accurate than others? Is that by coincidence, or is it true? Is there something in the cartridge design and how it sits inside the rifling that makes it more accurate? Say like a Creedmoor versus a 0.6 or something like that.
Yeah, so a 0.6, when that was designed, they didn't have a lot of people didn't care that much about accuracy, and they didn't have bullets that were manufactured even that accurately to produce the accuracy that we're getting today. So, and modern bullets are, we have these high BC bullets, longer, pointier, that kind of thing. And then the original chambers for like the 0.6 were just not designed around that. So some of the new calibers, especially like a lot of the ones that Hornady's launched, like the Creedmoors, the PRC line, they have a longer free bore, and the bullets, and they're really designed around these longer like ELDX, ELDM bullets or VLDs, where the bullet is almost fully supported in the free bore of the chamber. So it has less distortion as it enters the lands and grooves. So they are for sure more accurate due to the design of the chamber kind of being matched to the cartridge design, whereas the 0.6 is the 308s back in the day.
In looping that kind of back to the misconceptions concept, we still get a lot of customers that they want a 300 Win Mag because it's a classic, it's what they know. They're pretty the confidence of feeling like, well, I can get ammo anywhere I go is a selling point. But if you compare a 300 Win Mag, look at it side by side with a 300 PRC, the Win Mag's, it's got the belt on the case. The bullet is sitting way deeper in the case for shorter free bore and meeting Sammy's spec. That was designed back in the day where a 180 sort of rounded shoulder exposed lead tip bullet was the thing. And now you compare that to a 300 PRC and designed around a 212 grain, super high BC efficient, accurately manufactured bullet. It's really no comparison, especially for people that want to shoot factory ammo. The PRC is just gonna whoop it 9 times out of 10 in most rifles, just because of that design and the philosophy of building around the most modern streamlined bullet available.
So it's certainly, yeah, if you were to build 100 300 PRCs and 100 300 Win Mags, that the over the course of all those rifles, the average group is just, you're just going to get a better gun out of that PRC. Not that you can't have a very accurate 300 Win Mag, but just you take a large sample size and you're just going to have a more consistent, accurate gun.
Especially the further you shoot. Now we build people 300 Win Mags still all the time. If it's someone that wants to shoot factory ammo and stretch it out and shoot long range, that's where the difference in the 300 PRC really starts to show up.
And some of these older cartridges, we've actually, especially if they're a hand loader or want to shoot our AllTerra ammo, we've changed the geometry of the chambers, even for like, the 300 Win Mag or 308, so that it has some of the characteristics of, say, the PRC line or the Creedmoors. And so that way, if they want to shoot factory ammo, it'll still go bang. It'll still usually shoot pretty stinking well. But if it is designed around bullets or cartridge or ammo where the bullet's pushed out further in the actual case and has more of the geometry of the newer, more modern cartridges.
This isn't a misconception, but just looking over everything from you guys, it made me think of, obviously it's pretty popular these days to, there's even guys building quote unquote rifles at home, right? With things like prefits and getting in action and screwing on a prefit and getting their own stock or chassis or what have you, and just assembling all these components together. And there can be some good builds out of that. But I guess one question I have is I do see a lot of like ways that you guys are doing things differently with, as we've talked about, the action and the receiver. What was mentioned but not fully discussed was the barrel and how that seats with the receiver. And so I guess with all of the patented technology that you guys have in different ways, are you in the component game at all? Meaning, can someone buy just one of your actions and do either a pre-fit or have some other gunsmith chamber up a barrel for your action? Or because of all these patented technology and changes, do you pretty much need to stick with like AllTerra components only working together kind of as a complete rifle?
So we do sell a component action. We sell our stocks as a component, which are pretty popular. Our component action undergoes the exact same manufacturing process as and it's called our C2. Our in-house only rifle action is the Convergence. The only difference between those two is the barrel connection. So the barrel connection on our Convergence that we build our own rifles with only uses the patent where there's the seating rings at the front and back, sort of like a mortise and tenon of the barrel connection threads. The C2 does not have that. So anybody can buy a C2. They can go to Carbon 6 and get a pre-fit for it, have a gunsmith spin up a barrel for it. And so you're getting the patent of our bolt lug design and integration with the receiver, but not the barrel connection, which we reserve for ourselves.
Okay, got it. So one of the benefits of the action design, and from what I understand, like the bolt and the raceways and how some of the changes have existed there, is, as you've talked about, to like improve feeding and make sure that this action is going to just cycle without fail kind of under all conditions, which is obviously important to hunters. I'm curious though, like to expand on, one, feel free to expand on the changes that you have made to help with that, but two, how much of a component in my mind that comes into play here is what is feeding your action, meaning what type of magazine or internal or detachable magazine is helping to feed the action. Like how much of that comes into play with cycling? And is there a certain recommended setup that if a guy gets a C2 action, for example, is that recommended only for a certain type of feeding platform, or is there some variety there?
So the patent has to do with cycling the bolt. And that's what you find is some of these aftermarket actions, the bolt to receiver clearance is incredibly tight. And if you get any like moon dust in there, they often get sticky, or the bolt will actually seize up inside the receiver. Or if you get water in there and it climb a mountain and it freezes, and then you kind of just, the whole thing's frozen together. So what we wanted to do is fix that. The actual picking up of rounds and cycling of rounds, that's all has to be tweaked. Either, on our rifles, we just kind of tweak with the internal box mag or the detachable box mag to get them to pick up rounds smoothly. And, that's like a typical gunsmith kind of activity as they put together a gun. But yeah, we inlet our stocks for all different types, whether it be the hinged floor plate, flat bottom style internal box mag. They're common on most hunting rifles, or the AI style, Accuracy International style mags, or they have some more sleek Hawkins
100
DBMs.
Yeah, all the bottom metal and internal box mag, etc. hardware that we're using is the same high-end stuff that other high-end builders are using. But yeah, like Drew says, it's that no-fail cycling is really the bolt interfacing inside the receiver, where the bolt lugs come into contact with the receiver only as the bolt fully closes. And as soon as you lift it, the way it's cut like an ellipse instead of a perfect circle like other ones, as soon as you open up that bolt, it's self-cleaning, self-clearing to avoid getting frozen up, like he explained in those hunting type situations.
Do you guys use a 2-lug or 3-lug bolt?
Two.
Okay. Was that very intentional? Was that just because of the design that's what made the most sense? Or what, I guess, what is your opinion on that? Because some guys say it doesn't matter. Some guys are, kind of and big fans of being in one camp or the other in terms of lugs, and obviously related to that bolt lift.
So one of the things we wanted to do with this is the technology works with is any amount of lugs. And that's actually the way it's written up in our patents. But usually 3 lugs are 60 or 70 degree throw. Sometimes there's 2 lugs that do that. But having a 90-degree throw, it doesn't require as much force lifting on the bolt to cock the firing pin and kind of release the bolt so you can grab the next round. So what we wanted to do is make sure that, one, the guns shoot accurately, but you could actually get on target better and stay on target better for follow-up shots. So if you have to lift with more force on, say, a 60 or 70 degree throw of the bolt, you're more apt to pull off target more than you are with like a 90-degree throw bolt like ours, where you can just use one finger. And so therefore you take a shot and you want to get back on that animal, whatever it is, to be able to see, or target to see where you actually impacted. You're more likely to do that. And going along those lines, we also designed the stock and our muzzle brakes to be able to stay on target better, just for those reasons.
Yeah, and on the bolt lug thing, our design would not possibly even work with anything but 2 lugs. If we were in front of a whiteboard, it would be so much easier to show. But if you picture an oval or an ellipse, which is the shape of the inside of our receiver, and as you bring the bolt down and the bolt lugs turn inside of there, and at their final resting place in battery, the outside of the bolt lugs are making perfect contact inside. So that's how we get this consistent concentricity. Every time you close the bolt, it turns, drops into the narrow side of the oval, if you will. And so there's only 2 points of contact at the closest area of an oval. So that's by design the only way that this technology works for us.
You mentioned stocks a couple times. I'd just love to hear more about your stocks and kind of what goes into the design. What were the goals of the design? You mentioned earlier things like staying on target. So, what is in the stock geometry that helps with recoil and just kind of repeatability? And what other aspects of the stock did you work into design for what intent?
So the original, the reason I got into the stock manufacturing game was not necessarily for these reasons, but because it took such a long time. Lead times for stocks to build a completed rifle were 6-8 months, which really hasn't dropped off a whole lot in the industry. But I thought to myself, well, we got all the machining capability. I'm pretty sure I could design something that had a lot of these features that force people to shoot better and get into full, make molds from design to final product in less time than it would take me to order one. So that's kind of the evolution of where that came from. But as far as functionality, it's got a negative comb, which is the part your cheek sits on. And when the gun recoils, the actual comb of the stock, or the part your cheek's sitting on, doesn't come back and smack you in the face. So that's one of the aspects, right? The comb is actually at or above center line of recoil. And what that does is, and as far as I know, I think we're the only stock company that does that. If the stock is below the center line of recoil, so basically imaginary bore or imaginary line down the bore of the barrel, that's where the recoil is going to be. If the stock is below that point, which as far as I know, every stock in the market is, it creates a fulcrum point. So the whole gun wants to pivot up over that. And you've probably seen this, like go to the range and someone shoots the gun and the gun comes flying up. And then they bouncing around on the bench or on the ground. So we actually made it so that the center line of recoil goes into your shoulder rather than over a fulcrum and try and climb. And then another feature we made is, a lot of these stocks, people say they like a palm swell, but if you look at most palm swells, they sit so far out to the side away from the trigger that when you start squeezing on the trigger and kind of packing on the pounds of that trigger, it's going to cause you to pull the gun off axis, left and right. So we actually sunk the entire, it feels like a palm swell. They're super comfortable, but we actually sunk the entire area where your palm goes almost directly in line with the trigger. So that way, when you're packing on the pounds, is pulling more straight in line with the trigger, and you're less apt to pull off target. Yeah, so those are the two main characteristics of that stock design. And also, a lot of the stocks on the market are like kind of caliber specific. You can only shoot above this caliber, otherwise they might crack. So we've actually kind of modified our manufacturing process so we can add more carbon in certain areas. So like right now, we just make all of our stocks. So we have 12 layers of carbon in the key area around the receiver. So it basically, we're gonna do a stock torture test here, make a video of it shortly. But we ran over one of them with Todd's truck, and it held the weight of Todd's truck, or at least one wheel of Todd's truck.
Leaning up on the curb outside, drove a wheel right up on it, and that was an inletted stock too, so not even full strength. That's on the rifle type of strength. The other thing is the aesthetics and the carbon fiber quality is a pretty big thing when somebody's investing in a rifle of this caliber. And so having our own full control, actually, most of the stocks were made right here in this shop until last year. Our partner Jay is making them over in Caldwell at his own shop at home, but it's, still our stock, our manufacturing, and there's so much room for error in the carbon layup, the way the resin infuses, little dimples and air pockets and straightness of the fibers, that having full control of that and being able to just tell our own guy, hey, this is the standard for aesthetics and build quality is huge, rather than waiting 8 months for a batch of stocks to come in outsourced and be, lackluster about the way they look.
In terms of, I think you made some changes just I think recently to stocks, right? So I guess my question is, if a guy was familiar with your stocks 2 years ago, what are the differences or what's new? Because I think there was an update for 2023, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so we added a second stock design this year, which our original is the Carbon Hunter, the new one's the Carbon Hunter 2. Both stocks are fully available. So one of the main things is we started getting a lot more demand for detachable box mag bottom metal. In our original stock, the depth below the action was just a hair on the deep side, to where when you'd put a DBM up into it, there wasn't a lot of positive contact on the bolt face to the back of the round. And so it was sketchy on being able to positively pick up a round every time. So on the Carbon Hunter 2, that's the only stock we're doing for DBMs. And that's a better design, thinned it up. Now the bolt picks up, the top half of the back of the round instead of the top quarter or third. Personal preference things too. Our Carbon Hunter original has textured grip on the palm and up on the forend. The new version does not. Some people like it, some don't. Same with the Monte Carlo style cheek piece on the sides. So, and then the big thing that people have really liked on the new stock is that flush integrated pick rail up on the forend, which is just a more modern design. Definitely not specific to us. It's sort of the new design on the forend of a lot of stocks out there. And now we're in the process of adding that to the original Carbon Hunter. So just two different options for people to choose from now.
Jumping back to the misconceptions, one of them that you guys said you see quite a bit is just price. Like, you guys build high-end precision rifles that clearly are far from cheap. And there's this misconception of price is just you guys, with you and many other builders. So I'm not saying this of you specifically, but just like, you just must be making bank selling these rifles for thousands of dollars when you can get a rifle off the shelf for a few $100s, right? So talk, I guess, a bit about what is involved, time, component, investment, materials, that makes the price what it is. And that if people think, you're just making this crazy, crazy profit margin on every single item, why that may not be true.
Yeah, it's even at the price point that we're at, our margins are slim. One, because it's very capital intensive. Having all the machinery here, the machinery has to stay busy, which it does. But the design aspect, you got to get a return on all that too. I had 3 years of basically full-time work with engineers, machine shops, trying to prove out the process and make sure that we can accurately and reliably, consistently make parts to the tolerances that we needed to get this accuracy. So that's a big part of it. The other thing is there's a lot of ways of cutting corners when it comes to manufacturing. For instance, If you want to buy a receiver that has a pinned on recoil lug, so like the receiver is 1 inch, 350 thou, and if you have a pinned on recoil lug, you can start off with a bar of material that's just slightly over that 1 inch, 350, and then turn that down and then do all the mill work. If you want to have an integrated pick rail or integrated recoil lug, you got to start off with a 2 inch piece of round bar. So our material starts off, just for the receiver body alone, is 8 pounds. By the time we're done with it, it's less than a pound. So
And everything is 7+ pounds of that is pure waste.
Well, we recycle it, but pennies on the dollar.
Right.
Yeah, and that's just the manufacturing side of it. The other side is just for a receiver to source a 4/16 2-inch round bar that's 9¼ inches long for a long action receiver, and then have it go from the steel supplier to a heat treat place, bring it in here, gun drill, wire EDM, the raceway, all the different work that has to happen to them, between shipping, all, the costs add up like crazy by the time we have a finished receiver, and that's just one part of the whole rifle.
We have more money, and I heard this stat from what I believe to be a pretty reliable source. We have more money into our raw material of the receiver than Remington did when they were producing the Remington 700 in the completed product. And that's before any of the major machine work has been done to it.
Wow.
So it definitely adds up. And it's, again, the raw material being one thing, but we have about, it depends on what you choose to do or what all we do to these rifles. Sometimes we just build a gun. Sometimes we build a gun, put an optic on it, and then sometimes we build a gun, put an optic on it, and go validate the ballistics data of that gun out to 1,000 yards. And that there's a lot of labor in that. So like just the base rifle, we have 15 to 18 hours in each one of them of labor, not including machine time.
Yeah, I think I can comfortably speak for Drew by saying that his brand exists because he wants to make what he feels like is the best rifle that can be made, not because he sees it as a get rich scheme.
Yeah, you don't get in the gun industry to get rich. Especially when the federal government takes 11% off of the top of the revenue, no matter what you make in profit.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Is that an excise tax? I know that there's some builders who stay small on purpose because if you build less than a certain amount of rifles, you don't face that additional tax. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you produce 49 or less a year, you don't have to pay excise tax. And as soon as you hit 50, you owe 11% of the revenue of all 50 plus all other guns above 50 that you make. So and that's off of revenue. So it's definitely, there's that baked into all of it, right?
Yeah, man.
But still far and above the largest cost is just the added labor. And we don't just build the guns and then kick them out the door. They're, if they don't shoot to our standards, we'll tear the whole thing apart, diagnose it, and, whether it be like rebarrel it and start over from scratch and start repainting the whole thing. And we'll do that before it ever leaves here. And, that happens on occasion.
Yeah, no matter how consistently we build the rifles, we feel like through experience, we still have to go break in the barrel and shoot every one of them just to make sure that we're going to provide what the customer is expecting.
I was just, that leads back to my original question there of like, what is that? You would immediately defaulted to rebarreling it. Is that the most common thing that happens if you're gonna get a gun that doesn't shoot?
No, that we usually look through everything and test everything before we get down to that, because that's the most expensive part to redo. You have a huge amount of labor into that. We have a proprietary chambering process that's, you know, even using CNC machinery, it's still twice the time that someone else can do it, or, you know, standard gunsmithing chambering process.
Yeah, so we've got a flow sheet for the guys in the shop when one isn't performing to standard, and it typically starts with evaluating the optic mounts, optic mounting, torques on different things. I mean, loose muzzle brake. There's so many little things that typically are an easy fix. And then, you know, sometimes you go through everything and it turns out it's a bad barrel, spin up a new barrel and it goes out and shoots.
But to your answer, to your question, Steve, I would say most of the time it's optics mounting. And we see that a lot when customers try and mount their own optics.
What's the mistakes they're making?
Clamping rings completely tight on one side and loose on the other. And, you know, a few thousandths of an inch of scope movement is like a minute of angle projected out at 100 yards. So if that scope moves at all or has any, like, you know, lateral flex or anything like that, you're going to see that.
Yeah, torques being inconsistent on all four screws on each optic mount, torques into the receiver being off, using somehow too long of a screw that bottoms out in the bottom of the receiver mounting hole before it reaches torque. So you're torquing in the bottom of the hole and not on the mount itself. There's all kinds of different things.
I guess I'm racking my brain on my personal setup, but so I've got a little. What do I have, Mark? What's that torque wrench we have?
That's a Wheeler, I think.
Wheeler torque wrench. Yeah. So I mean, you drop the scope in there and just torque everything down to 18 foot-pounds. Are you good, or can you screw that up?
So one of the things we found is not all scope mounts are made equal, and we're now. I just got an email 10 minutes ago from one of my engineers and CAD guys that we're designing our own, just because we found that you know, we might go through two sets of certain brand of scope rings that don't have enough clamping force, or the bore where the scope goes is not straight, so it's not actually clamping very much of that scope. It's got very little contact. So we're actually going down the road of designing, and we're going to build our own rings just so we can control that. And, you know, you don't have to go mount up some rings, put the scope in there, shoot it, find out the gun doesn't shoot, come back, inspect the rings, swap out rings, go back to the range, shoot it, make sure everything holds tight.
Yeah, it's fairly frustrating to build what we feel is a very, very accurate precision rifle and then be putting subpar mounts on it. And it sort of like, if everything isn't strong and perfect and precision, then that one cheapest thing on the rifle is going to not do the project justice. And we're running into that more and more, enough to the point where it's like, let's just make AllTerra rings for our rifles also.
So you're not talking like someone went to Walmart and bought rings. You're talking obviously quality rings from companies out there that exist that you're still seeing these issues.
Well-known good, usually good rings. But when you're doing more volume like us, the average guy can go pick a set up, and chances are they're going to be sufficient and work well. And the majority of them do for us, but with our volume, it just exposes,
Yeah, you get 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, whatever.
Yeah,
shows up.
and
Yeah.
and it's actually quite a bit more than that. And then you're talking labor to redo stuff, lapping time, remounting, back to the range, more ammunition, more rounds. It all adds up.
Gotcha.
When you guys were talking about testing and verifying rifles, and I know that you have an accuracy guarantee, and feel free to talk about that, but what do you have your own facility that you're doing all this testing on, or what are the conditions in which you're doing this initial verification and testing?
So it's not our own facility. We are a member at a private range that's about a 10-minute drive away, and it may as well be our own facility because during the week, there's rarely anybody else there. So we have a full-time shooter and ammo guy, Brandon, who's super talented, built to handle daily recoil, high attention to detail, good shooter. And so he's out there every day with the rifles. It's an outdoor 100-yard range with a concrete covered slab, and we big berms around the sides. There's definitely wind and breeze to contend with most days. Mirage on the target. It's like, depending on the time of year, it's one problem or another. But we're testing them laying down prone with a long range only rear wedge bag and a bipod in the front, just like any other human would go shoot their rifle.
And then what is the guarantee that you guys are looking to shoot?
So sub half inch, 3-shot groups, 100 yards, premium ammo. And whether that's a good factory ammo, there's a lot of inconsistency in factory ammo, and a lot of that goes back to the PRC stuff. The more modern cartridges, the factory ammo just shoots better, but that's with good factory ammo or our own internal AllTerra ammo.
So I see, so your own AllTerra ammo, I guess there's obviously certain cartridges, like I shoot 7-SAUM a lot and I've talked about that, and I think I've seen it as an option that you guys offer. So for that, it's not something where there is factory ammo. You guys have your own load essentially to pick on 7-SAUM, for example, of, hey, we chamber rifles in this cartridge. There is no great factory ammo offering. So you've developed essentially the AllTerra, I don't want to say factory ammunition, but essentially your own ammunition to shoot.
Yeah, exactly. And the last 7-SAUM guy, he wanted to shoot copper bullets. And so we developed an AllTerra load using a Hammer 155 copper bullet. The one previous to that was just a factory ammo type of customer. And the only ammo we could find, factory ammo, was a couple of crusty old boxes of the yellow and green Remington stuff.
Core lock.
Yeah, with core locked bullets. And it was like, well, let's buy some of that, and it's all we can find, and went out and was able to shoot sub half-inch groups with it. So kind of, some of the calibers, I'm sure you see it too, are just very difficult to find components for, let alone good factory ammo, that being one of them.
What? Like, I'm thinking about so you get like the first gun I got was a Weatherby backcountry, and then talk to people and they're like, Cahill, for example, Mark, you're just like, well, I'll send you like a bunch of different ammo and just keep shooting till you find one that works. Are you just playing with coincidence there and luck? Like, just there's enough things wrong that you're just hoping one of these things works? Is your gun going to shoot just much more consistently with all sorts of different ammo, right? It's not going to be as sensitive to charge weight and seating depth and bullet design.
Definitely, yeah. The all the precision that goes into the rifle reduces the likelihood that one ammo is going to shoot significantly better than another. Now, we do see instances where, and pretty often, where one lot of a factory ammo shoots noticeably different than another lot number. Still, qualifying for our accuracy needs and what we're shooting for. But even in, we got 2 different lots of 7 PRC ammo right now, and in most rifles, one of the lots is shooting like one whole groups, whereas the next lot number is shooting, just under half inch fairly consistently. And for us, that's significant.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys are in touch with how strapped the industry is for ammunition and powder, and you try and find reloading supplies at your local Cabela's or Sportsman's or whatnot, and it's just non-existent. Even the big players in ammunition are having trouble sourcing the same powder, especially over and over again. So they actually have to blend it. And from lot to lot, you might find big velocity differences. So within the same lot, they're usually very consistent as far as velocity goes. But as soon as you switch to the next lot, we've seen 100 foot per second velocity spread, just because they need to, they can't quit producing ammunition because they can't get whatever powder. So they'll blend powders to get there. But
so that's you got lot A and lot B, and lot A shoots better than B. You just pull a bullet apart on the lot B ammo and say, like, why the hell is this shooting different? And then is it coming down to the powder?
Typically, yes, and we don't really pull them apart to investigate, because every round we shoot, we have a chronograph out there, and so if we can see there's 100 foot per second difference from this lot to the next one, well, that's having an impact on your barrel harmonics, and one rifle will just like one harmonic better than the other, and vice versa.
But where you really see that is, let's say you got half a box of lot A and half a box of lot B in your pockets, and you're going to go out and try and take some long shots. You're going to see a big difference at distance if you have 100 foot per second velocity spread. So you almost have to dial in your factory ammo. If you're going to shoot factory ammo, you almost have to just make sure you got all of one lot there, or verify that your second lot has the same velocity or very close to.
I know that's one of the topics here. Mark, you want to jump into that, of long range shooting and ethics?
Yeah, I was just kind of curious to get your guys' take. Again, going back to the misconceptions that you guys see. And I think as important as much as there is a focus on precision and the capabilities of these rifles and cartridges and bullets for that matter, like, at the end of the day, I feel like these systems are far more capable beyond where hunters, quote unquote, should be shooting animals. And I'm not defining what someone's distance should be, but I just think if you take someone with a custom rifle, myself included, it's more capable than I am. And so I was just curious from your take, like, where ethics and all that really comes into play, because you guys are building rifles and providing capabilities that exceeds the shooter, or just kind of how you guys think about that topic.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. In almost every instance, these rifles outperform the shooter. And when it comes to like long range shooting, the most important part is having tons of trigger time and really understanding your gun, and more importantly, understanding how to read wind. That is the most challenging part. Like Todd was talking about earlier, we have Brandon that does this full time. I don't even know how many hundreds of rounds he shoots a week, but he might qualify 5 or 6 guns a week at 500 and $1,000. And most of the time he doesn't have first round impacts because he didn't pick up the wind properly. that is a really important factor. And even Brandon said, I probably wouldn't shoot anything, with deer and elk or whatever past 600, maybe 700 if he's got really good feel for what the wind's doing, or if there is no wind at all. But on that same token, if you make a bad shot at 400, let's say you hit some brush or something like that, or the bullet hit some brush, or you didn't get a good trigger squeeze, it's really nice to have the capability of not just taking a Hail Mary at a grand if you need to finish that animal off. Like actually having the capability to just, it's like you practice, and did this a lot in archery too. There's no reason to shoot at 10 yards when you can do all your practice at 100 yards, because then it just makes you that better at shorter ranges.
It's funny you said that. I just literally yesterday went out and shot like I've only been shooting nice rifles for 4 years now. But just through my limited shooting, it just seems like the wheels fall off past 600 yards. Like kind of go up in the mountains and shoot steel and be pretty consistent at 500. And then, after 600, things just really open up and it's all wind. But then yesterday I went out and shot out at 800, 900 yards just for that very reason, because I hadn't shot that gun past 6, just to if I do need a follow-up shot on something, it'd be nice to know that things are on. And I did pretty good out of 720 and then got to 880 and literally just it was where I set the steel target. It was across a canyon, like a big horseshoe canyon, and the wind was blowing, 2 different directions. Where I was laying and where the target was literally 180-degree different wind. And it was just almost impossible to read.
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, on shots like that, where your rifle is the most consistent variable in the entire equation, and you've got human variable, environmental variable, ballistics variables,
ammo temp variables.
Yeah, all the way down to say it's a cold day. Was your ammo, your round you're about to shoot in your pocket, staying warm closer to the temperature that your ballistics are set up for, or was it in your gun freezing? And
I've never heard of that before. Ammo temp?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's what's so cool about these modern ballistics programs too. So we set customers up with a full custom rifle profile in the Hornady Fordoff app when they get our ballistics package. And it pretty much gives them a baseline for what their rifle does as we or our professional guy shot it and found and set up for them. And there's a section in there where you can enter your velocity at different temperatures. And then when you put in the temperature for the shot you're about to take, it's going to automatically calculate what your adjusted velocity should be.
So you're saying if you got your bullets in your pocket and their kind of body temperature is going to shoot different than if they were, strapped to the backpack and at air temperature?
Yeah, if there's a large discrepancy between the outside air and
right, yeah, it's 10 degrees outside and 70 degrees in your pocket.
Same thing if people are shooting at the range or shooting long range and they've got their ammo laying out baking in the sun versus in the shade, that's going to cause a variable. Let's say you've fired a number of shots and your barrel's hot, your chamber's hot, and you close around in your chamber and you're sitting there waiting, watching your conditions, watching your wind. You're cooking that round in your hot chamber, and if somebody waits too long to fire that shot, there's another velocity variable.
It's like the more I learn, the shorter my effective range becomes.
It all boils down to practice, though. The more conditions you practice in, the more you start to understand and pick up on these little things, and then by the time you go hunt, the closer to automatic you can be, the better off you are. And that's different for everybody.
And there's also ways around this, especially if you're a hand loader. so you can work on like your powder charge and adjusting your powder charge to where your ideal powder charge, if you go up or down 0.2 of a grain in powder, it doesn't change velocity very much.
Yeah.
So that way, it kind of simulates going up or down in temperature. So more powder kind of simulates higher temperature, and less powder simulates lower temperature. So if you have a powder charge node that is not very, it doesn't affect accuracy as much, looking at what your velocity did on either side of that can make it more stable. So less apt to
see difference.
Yeah.
I think I was listening to the Mark was one of those Hornady podcasts, and they were talking just even about having like full case capacity, right? Like if you have kind of a light load in there where you can shake it and hear the powder rattling around. Even if you're aiming uphill or downhill, it means the powder's like slid to the front or slid to the back, and you're going to get variances there.
Yeah, the flame front from the primer changes the burn rate. So it's always best. And this is also one of the things that we ran into as a challenge coming up with our AllTerra ammo is one with powder shortages. We have to basically choose powders that will give us the velocity and consistency we need, but we have to find powders where we get that velocity and consistency with a certain bullet where we're at, high 90s percentage of case capacity. So that way it has less variation of that.
There's such a rabbit hole you can go down on all this stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah.
All to fill a tag.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's funny too, is because 90% of the time we all build these super nice rifles and whatnot and get out in the field, and like the last 10 animals I've killed have basically 100 yards, 150 yards, 220 yards. Like it's pretty rare actually. I have to stretch something out.
Yeah.
Random question, guys. I was looking at a page on your website where it has like kind of in stock rifles or built rifles kind of ready to go. There's a test target with each of them. The one I happen to be looking at for this rifle, there's one test target with 2 separate 3-shot groups. Next to one of the 3-shot groups, it says the first 3. Next to the other 3-shot group, it says the second 3. They're clearly at, they're separate groups at different points of aim. I'm just curious, and maybe you don't know offhand, is this literally the first 3 shots down the barrel and the second 3 shots down the barrel? Is that what we mean by like first and second 3 on this particular test target, or is that maybe not the case?
Yeah, good question. Definitely not. So we have a break-in procedure where we're typically shooting rounds just into the bank, shoot one, clean, shoot one, clean, shoot one, clean. And there's sort of a 7 to 9, 10, 11 round process where we're really just breaking in the throat, getting the scope zeroed. And it's not until about 9, 10, 11 rounds plus that we start shooting actual groups to qualify or signify the accuracy of the rifle. And that's a kind of a feel thing for Brandon or whoever's out there shooting the rifles on what's a balance between feeling like we've got the throat broken in, the barrel's much more broken in than brand new, and we'll definitely not just go fire 3 first rounds out of the gun. If it qualifies, then call it good. We put a little more work into it than that.
Okay. I assume that was the case, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, but what I was showing on those 2 targets is the first actual 3-shot group compared to the next 3-shot group. And if you overlay those 2 targets on top of each other, it's really, and based on the location and the aiming point, it's really 6 rounds all under a ½ inch.
You commonly see bullet velocities pick up as you get 50 rounds, 100 rounds down the barrel, or is that more of a misconception that happens?
It's barrel to barrel. We've seen we've done some testing where you might shoot 100 rounds, 150 rounds, and it might only pick up like 20 feet per second. But then we've seen other barrels where it might pick up 100, 120 after like 50, 80 rounds, something like that.
Yeah, or you get 80 rounds in and it speeds up and plateaus, and then you get to 120 rounds and it peaks up again and then kind of plateaus for good. Yeah, they're
So it is happening, just to what extent? Yeah. Is that just simply the grooves and the rifling kind of just, I'm assuming there's going to be some type of machining marks in there, right? Is that just the bullet kind of smoothing those out so it's slipping down the barrel with less resistance?
It actually, I think it's the opposite. So pressure kind of dictates velocity. And so
Okay.
you get fire cracking, which is like micro fractures in the outer surface of the lands and grooves of the barrel. And so, and then this is theory, and a lot of people will back up this theory, and but it essentially creates more friction, which then allows, creates more pressure, so therefore more velocity.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Guys, we could talk all day, I'm sure. I don't want to I don't want to take your whole day though. To wrap up, what do you guys see? Like, what's common right now? What's a trend? What are guys after? They're calling and asking questions about building a rifle. I'm just curious, like what are guys wanting cartridge wise? What are they wanting in their rifle and components? What comes to mind?
7 PRC.
Yeah.
The hype is real.
Barrel and light.
Yeah, shorter on the barrels, and a lot of customers want barrels that are even shorter than we make. Because for us, it's all about the performance of our rifles, and we're sampling more of some of the shorter stuff, 18, 20 inches in the bigger Magnum long action calibers. We honestly don't like to go below 22 inches on those, just for performance sake. But yeah, man, 7 PRCs and shorter and lighter is kind of what people are after right now. We've got so many of those 7 PRCs in the queue to build and waiting on barrels for them. And meanwhile, we can kind of at will build 5 PRCs, which is what you see for sale on our website, versus a year ago, we couldn't keep a 6.5 PRC in stock. So it's kind of funny how the demand and the trend and the what's new thing plays such a role in what we're seeing and doing.
What are you guys personally shooting these days?
I shoot a 300 Sherman short, which a lot of people won't really recognize or know what that is, but it's a Wildcat round that you can get ADG brass for, and it's a fairly well supported Wildcat. Honestly, I like the ballistics on it. I like the light recoil and the performance I get with a heavy 208 grain bullet and a short action. And we had a barrel here already chambered for one, so I built myself a rifle with it.
Nice.
And I got a short barrel 300 PRC, shorter barrel than. So my guns are always the test guns of the shop. And the last gun that I built for myself got sold. Just, do initial testing, kind of meets our guarantee, like the ballistics, and then someone sees it on some post, and next thing you know, I'm got to find a new gun for myself. But current one that hasn't sold to anybody or is another short barreled 20-inch 300 PRC.
Yeah, so Drew's rifle is the first convergence long action action that he made. So it's got quadruple zeros for the serial number, which is fairly special, and it seems to keep getting rebuilt into something different. And I think Drew shoots less than anybody here anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome,
hunt
guys.
less now.
Well, to wrap up, just let guys know where to find you, how to reach out if they have questions, all that good stuff.
Yeah. AllTerraArms.com. That's 2 L's, 2 R's, 2 A's is our website. We're on Instagram at AllTerra Arms. If we're not shadow banned, you might be able to find us, which is a whole nother conversation. And we are trying to do more with our YouTube channel now too, making a couple more in-depth videos a month in-house here. And so we've got some recent stuff on YouTube that dives a little deeper into some of the things we touched on in this conversation.
Well, that is a wrap on this one, guys. Thank you as always for tuning in. Check out the links in the show description if you want to get in contact with the guys from AllTerra Arms or check out more of what they are up to. If you are enjoying the show, it would help us tremendously if you just share it with a friend or leave a rating or review in the podcast app that you're using, where you can do so. And if you have anything for us and you want to contact us, whether that's a question, a comment, or a suggestion, send an email to podcast@exomountaingear.com or look for the link in the show description that says leave us a message, and you can ask us a question via audio using whatever device you're on right now. It'd be great to hear from you. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe or follow in your podcast app so that you receive future episodes automatically, and we'll talk to you soon.